Okay, so we are live on YouTube. Wonderful. It's about 9, almost 9. Notification that said Temple Beth Shalom went live on YouTube. All right. Well, it's wonderful to have everyone here, and also anyone who's joining us online. We are going to be starting today in Second Samuel, chapter 15. But first, we'll start with our blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. If you say Amen, you get full credit. There you go. And so we will start now. Of course, we're picking up again with David's son and now heir, or soon to be fully established, Avshalom, who was estranged from David for, maybe for the text presents it as a righteous reason, you might say, but for essentially killing his older brother for the for the assault that his older brother did on his sister, Absalom's sister, Tamar. And so Absalom was separated from David, and David and Yoav put together a plan so that they would be, somewhat reconciled after a long time of not being, around each other. But this is still probably a fraught situation. So, okay, sometime afterwards, after all I described, Avshalom provided himself with a chariot, horses, and 50 outrunners. So what's he doing? It's a public coming out thing for him, right? He's being out in public now. He's the heir. He's the oldest son of the king. You know, there's it's assumed at least that he's the heir, and now he's got to have some prestige around him, right? Because he's got all these people, outrunners. He's got all these people and horses and chariot. He's trying to build up that prestige. Absalom used to rise early and stand by the road to the city gates. And whenever a man had a case that was to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" And when he answered, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "It is clear that your claim is right and just, but there is no one assigned to you by the king to hear it." And Avshalom went on, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, and everyone with a legal dispute came before me, I would see he got his rights." Huh. Right? So what's he saying? He's saying, I would help you if only I had any power at all. Me with all my attendants and horses and chariots and being an important first living born son of the king. It would be great if I could help you, friend, but I can't do anything because I have no power to do anything for you. Um, and if a man approached to bow to him, Avshalom would extend his hand and take hold of him and kiss him, right? Avshalom did this to every Israelite who came to the king for judgment. Thus, Avshalom won away the hearts of the men of Israel. Right? It's easy. This is a perhaps eternal rule of politics. It's easy when you're the one out of power to say, to every single person, to every person. It couldn't possibly be that every person is right. But he says, to everyone, you're right, and I would give you I would grant what you desire if only I had any power to do so. Um, that's a pretty common thing to see, even in politics of the modern day. It's very easy, and it's very easy when you have no power to promise everything to whoever might be a supporter.
And then when you have power, you find
it may be more difficult to actually grant those people things than you promise. It's a lot easier to make promises than it is to fulfill them. Which Avshalom would also undoubtedly find, because that's just true. There's no way for things to be as easy to solve when you promise everybody everything. So after a period of 40 years had gone by, so this was we're not quite sure. It's either from when Israel first requested a king, or from David's anointment, or from when David separated himself from Saul.
Nice.
So there's a range of when this 50 years could be. It's not 50 years from the last sentence, but it is. I mean, he's been around for a while at this point. So after a period of 40 years had gone by, Avshalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow that I made to God." Or 1 sec, I'm trying to change something here using the wrong translation that I don't want. There we go.
Is it worth noting that the footnote at the bottom says instead of 40, it could read 4? Is that correct? So you said it's just a period of time, but
let me see.
Yeah, 40 has special significance in
it. I'm just trying to get back to no, you're okay, but I'm just trying to
40 years in the desert.
I see it says some Septuagint manuscripts and Syriac, I guess, manuscripts read 4. But the official text, the Masoretic text that we use, read Arba'im Shana, which means 40 years. So that's why there's this. So it is possible that that's what it could be. The text as we have received it says 40. So we choose to interpret what the 40 means rather than change it to 4. Although, who knows? Maybe we got it. I mean, you never know, but we can only go with what we've got, and this is what we've got. So, okay. The time is not so relevant. I mean, it's been some time, but Avshalom is around. He's doing stuff. He's being a political nudge, and he's wants to go to Hebron to fulfill a vow he made to God. It says, "So for your servant made a vow when I lived in Geshur of Aram. If God ever brings me back to Jerusalem, I will worship God." The king said, and this is a great and easy request. He said, "Great, cool. You made a vow. You want to go do some worship in Hebron? Go to Hebron." He says, the king said to him, "Lech b'shalom, go in peace." And so he set out for Hebron. Meanwhile, the commentators note that Hebron is also, and this will come into, I mean, if you ever hear modern stories about Hebron, not trying to get into into the modern political world, but there's a lot of talk of Hebron is in the West Bank, and there has been a long and ancient continuous presence of Jews in Hebron, and Hebron is a deeply important city as it was the capital of Judah. And has always had a deep affiliation. It's also from where David built his power base, and is why Avshalom is really going to Hebron now. So Hebron has really been a really important piece, a place in Jewish history for many thousands of years, for at least 3,000 years. So it's very complicated when we talk about whenever somebody says, "I have an idea for a settlement of a conflict." Just a reminder of how very, very complicated it is to just draw lines on maps.
Was the original connection point of Abraham with the land of Israel.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Hebron goes back even to that time. It's very significant to us. Okay, so So he set out for Hebron, but Absalom sent agents to all the tribes of Israel to say, when you hear the blast of the horn, uh, announce that Absalom has become king in Hebron. Uh-oh. Okay. So 200 Jerusalemites accompanied Absalom. They were invited and went in good faith, suspecting nothing. Right? So like the idea here is that like, okay, like yeah, they probably these people were like, oh, we're going to do sacrifices and so we're going to go do stuff in Hebron. That's fine. We can do that, I guess. I'm not really sure. The Deuteronomic historian would probably rap him on the knuckles a little bit and say, why are you doing sacrifices outside of Jerusalem? But sure, fine. They weren't as strict as that person would end up, as Josiah would end up being. So he comes there with all these people. If you were in Hebron and you see him arrive with all these people, you might think that this is a whole movement when really these people are just coming because they think it's a religious pilgrimage. They're not here for the politics, probably, we don't think. They just came with him from Jerusalem. So Absalom also sent to get Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from his town, Gilo. And when the sacrifices were to be offered, when the sacrifices were to be offered, the conspiracy gained strength, and the people supported Absalom in increasing numbers. So we know now that Ahithophel, this Gilonite, is a conspirator, right? He sent for him, so clearly they've been talking already. We understand. And we will learn that he's considered the wisest person in Israel. So he's a very powerful, authoritative voice in the political structure of Israel. And with him on Absalom's side, that's when the conspiracy gained strength. And the people supported Absalom in increasing numbers. So people started to say, like, okay, maybe this is what's happening. Like, maybe this is what's happening. Someone came and told David, the loyalty of Israel's force has veered toward Absalom, right? And of course, you could say here that's an interesting translation. The loyalty of Israel's force. What does it say? Lev ish Yisrael acharei Avshalom. So the heart of every man of Israel is going towards Avshalom. So more than the loyalty of the force, like it's a military coup. It's more like the people are turning towards they're going to support Avshalom. Yes, we anyone can stop if they have thoughts. We can,
I'm criticizing myself. I just noticed his name in Hebrew, the Father of Peace.
Yeah, yes. I mean, right. That is what he's named. Yes, he's Avshalom, the father of peace. Yeah, not so peaceful. It is one of those fun things in the Torah. Yeah. I don't know that it's irony, but whatever it is. Okay, so David, who has, can go back to this mindset that he got from his years of running from Saul, is like, hey, I know how to do this, right? Who knows how to run from the king? I know how to run from the king. If there's a new king, let's work on this. So whereupon David said to all the courtiers who were with him in Jerusalem, let us flee at once, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must get away quickly, or he will soon overtake us and bring down disaster upon us and put the city to the sword. Right? This is the only thing that tells me that David is still more astute even than Avshalom, who had this huge political maneuver to supplant David. David says, I'm not going to be dumb enough to try and fight it out here. I can't win here right now. I've got to find a way to get a whole new base of support if I'm going to become king, if I'm going to really be king. He's able to switch and just be like, okay, guess I'm not the king for the moment. I'm the rebel again. Let's go. In what I think is a very nimble political move by David, because I think most kings would not be able to make that switch. And we actually see in some parts of history, I'm thinking about, oh, who is it that Matilda fought forever and ended up killing in England in the 1300s? I'm sorry, my history's going a little crazy recently. But there are kings that can't adapt. They can't leave their base of power. They can't, these kind of things. And it's interesting that David is able to do that.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Yeah, sure, go with it.
Why doesn't he say,
Fight me.
right is right, and I'm the Lord's anointed. I will not stand for this.
Why doesn't he say that?
Yes.
He could say that, but he'd probably die. And if he dies, then nothing he ever said about being the Lord's anointed matters.
Right, and Absalom would then become king.
Right.
I just showed a little humility on his part too.
It actually does show, I think, a
Yes.
decent amount of humility. I'm surprised he's able to summon this level of humility, is essentially what I was trying to say before.
Also, David
yeah.
has never gotten by on rhetoric alone. Like he's always been like the political maneuver kind of person.
Yeah.
And so like I think if he tried to just be like to play on like the propaganda kind of thing, it wouldn't work out for him because that's just not his style.
Right. It's not his style, you're right. And he's astute enough to know that it wouldn't work. That's why I said, yeah, I mean, that would sound great. And then he'd be dead. He knows he can't hold the city. And so the rhetoric is great. He loves a good show. He loves to dance before the people, he loves to do all that. But that part only works when the facts are on when the reality is on your side. He can only do that after he actually wins the big battle, not before he wins the big battle. And he can't pretend he can hold this city if he can't, because nothing he says about himself matters if he doesn't win. I mean, that's kind of the thing about being the king in these kind of places this time. You have to keep winning. If you don't keep winning, then somebody else becomes king.
I'm thinking the German army in World War II in Stalingrad, they wouldn't retreat, they kept pushing instead of backing off.
Well, probably the whole going in there was their failure to understand, but I'm happy for it, I guess. I don't know, it's hard to really.
It would have been worse if Hitler had actually consolidated his power.
And not
Europe
gone into
and then
Russia,
killed
right?
all
Yeah,
the
yeah, right.
Jews in
Of course,
Europe.
that would be worse. So it worked out, I guess. It's hard to say anything good about.
Said 27 million
but-
Russians had to die.
Well, that was the Russian. Yeah, I mean, it's a world war. World wars are bad. I prefer not to get into them if it can be avoided. But if it can't, then you have to fight them, and people die in war.
And use decent strategies so you don't get defeated. And David has got the right strategy.
It seems like he does.
In
So
fact, that humility, see, that was a demonstration of Hitler's arrogance.
It-
And
it-
lack of
In our army, we call it a retrograde maneuver.
yeah. Well, he's got his own. The king has a readout, and that's where he's headed. So the king's courtiers said to the king, "Whatever our lord the king decides, your servants are ready." So these folks are still loyal, which is good. Unlike that one advisor who obviously went over to Absalom. So the king left, followed by his entire household, except for 10 concubines, whom the king left to mind the palace. Why would he do that?
Hopes to come back.
Okay, so maybe he's leaving them behind as a
Reminder he's coming.
this is my house. Okay, could be. I mean, if anything, is he worried about them? He's leaving them behind. He's taking everyone.
Doesn't sound like he's worried about them.
Doesn't sound like he's worried about them, right?
Women were treated as pawns in those days. And
Well, I mean, it's
some
not,
more
it's,
than others.
yes, and also it's not, yes, and it's not just that.
Mhm.
It's that as again, they're like his, it says concubines. They're his they're like why they're like quasi wives. They have status that is above, he assumed they wouldn't be touched because of that status. He didn't leave them behind because he didn't care what happened to them. So I guess what I'm trying to say. It was assumed that that was a thing, a custom that wouldn't be violated. Um, uh, just like if they were his regular, if any one of them were his regular wife, they wouldn't be accosted or murdered or violated. It would be expected that wouldn't happen. So he expected that in this case too. So the king left, followed by all the people, and here the note, the Septuagint reads his courtiers. So all the people that were following him, and they stopped at the last. They stopped at, it says, a faraway house. Here it says at the last house, but it's got hamerachak, which rachok is far away. It means far away in Hebrew. So it's like the far away house. It's a distant readout, right? It's a distant location. All his followers marched past him, including all the Heretites and all the Peletites and all 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gat, also marched by the king. So this was this is everybody who's still, all the forces still loyal to King David. And the king said to Ittai the Gittite, why should you too go with us? Go back and stay with the new king, for you are a foreigner and you are also an exile from your country. That's an interesting, right? So they'd said, remember they'd come with David from Gat and they pledged themselves to him, and they don't live in their country anymore. They live in Jerusalem. And he's like, look, this is a family dispute. But if your country is Israel, you really should have, it would have been better for you all to stick around for the new king and just serve him. Would have been better. I would have, this is what he says.
It's an interesting parallel with Ruth, who also was told, go back to your people, and she said no.
Right. It is a nice another example of that type scene of the not necessarily the convert, but of the loyal follower, essentially, which we do see repeated. David continues, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander about with us today, when I myself must go wherever I can? Go back and take your kin with you in true faithfulness. Right? With you, chesed ve'emet, right? It says, so in love and truth. Right? He's kind of saying that I'm not messing with you. This isn't a testing your you've got this small group of people. You're a very small minority in our people. I don't want to see something bad happen to you. I'm running away. We're doing this thing. I might live, I might die. There's no way of knowing. And so Ittai now gets his chance, and he replied to the king. It's worth knowing Ittai obviously not born a Jew, but Ittai is an extremely popular name in Israel. You should know it's an extremely popular name. So one of those biblical names of people who might not have started out as Jews, but ended up becoming so part of the story that Jews around the world name their kids after them. So Ittai replied to the king, as God lives, and we know that this is just a way of they're swearing. That's like when someone says to you today, I promise, I swear I would, this kind of thing. You're saying, right, as God lives, and as Adoni HaMelech, V'chai Adoni HaMelech, and as my Lord the King lives, wherever my Lord the King may be, there your servant will be, whether for death or for life. And David said to Ittai, then march by. And Ittai the Gittite and all his men and all the dependents who were with him marched by. So these are loyal Philistines, right? Because Gat was a Philistine city. It's very interesting. In a world before anti-Semitism, David is worried about the prejudice that Israelites will have for Philistines. And that's why he encourages the Philistines to stay in Jerusalem, to be loyal to the king, to not encourage people to think of them as having loyalties other than to the state, right? Or to the overall nation of Israel.
I always envisioned the Philistines being the enemies, permanent enemy.
And often and very commonly they were, but it's interesting, David, and obviously he knows these men very deeply. He lived outside of Gat, if you remember, when he was dealing with Saul and all that for a while. He and his men lived in this town outside of Gat in the Philistine territory. And so he knows these people very deeply. But he really is, I believe, looking out for them here. He's essentially seeing, it's interesting to me only because very few rulers that come in the 3,000 years after David, and especially in times of Jewish diaspora, will care very deeply about what their people will do or be prejudiced against the Jews for, and do anything to try and protect them. Whereas David here is trying to look out for a potentially persecuted minority that would be distrusted because of their background. It's there's some interesting stuff going on there.
So a slight shift, and I don't know if the story is true. I'd be interested in your observation. I read yesterday that there's a growing movement of Arab Israelis away from Hamas and solidifying themselves with Israel.
Well, Arab Israelis have never been. If an Arab Israeli had been directly affiliated with Hamas, they would be arrested and put in prison. Arab Israelis officially have never been supportive of Hamas, and very rarely are they actually supportive of Hamas. They'd rather live in Israel under a democratic system than live under a Hamas-controlled government like exists in Gaza. There is more integration, which is also more natural because Arab Israelis make up more of the percentage of the population than they ever have. And as that happens, they rise, they're also in higher positions in society than they've ever been, which happens as integration grows. They're the leading anchors on the news, and they're the second-ranking Supreme Court justice, and they're the CEO of Bezek, the largest telecommunications company. And as their presence grows, they also are like, look, we're leaders in different segments of society. We want our voice to be heard. We want to be represent. We want government and systems to better represent us. So all of those things happen, and with that comes greater desire for integration, so that they can influence society in a greater way. In a greater way. All of which is good. And has very little to do with anything relating to the relations between Israel and the Palestinians. Just functional, has very little to do.
I may have been very mistaken, but I always had assumed that they would keep quiet about that with the silent hope that Israel would become Palestine again. And they clearly are not in that position.
Well, it's also, it's one of those. Time passes, and in some ways it does just change realities. It's like anyone today who's like, I mean, like, I'm not trying to make a political point, but like anyone today who's like, we're gonna get rid of the US and give back, it's like, okay, but you know that's not gonna happen, right? Like that's just not gonna happen. A lot of these Arab Israelis recognize that even if it were desirable, it's not gonna happen. And you have to adjust to life as it is. I mean, sometimes. Or you can fight, so, you know, I think people should adjust to life as it is in that situation. That's what I think. In any event, so I think this is a very interesting relationship here between David and Ittai. So okay, verse 23, the whole countryside, the whole land, wept aloud as the troops marched by. The king crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the troops crossed by the road to the wilderness. Then Zadok appeared, with all the Levites carrying the Ark of the Covenant of God, and they set down the Ark of God until all the people had finished marching out of the city. Abiathar also came up.
Remind me who's that, okay, Zadok.
Zadok was a priest. In fact, everyone who's a big fan of The Crown or
English, yeah.
or any coronation of they sing this song at
Yes.
their things. Zadok the priest and Nathan the appointed. So Zadok will play an even greater role and will also, along with Nathan, be involved with picking David's successor. But this is his first appearance in the.
I think when they coronated English crown.
Yes, when they do a coronation, they sing that song about Zadok and Nathan and anointing Solomon. But of course it comes from our story. Okay, so Zadok was there and the Levites, and they got that, and Abiathar, who was also a priest, they were all there. And everybody, and they also, it's like, okay, it's just worth noting, by the way, they did take the ark from the temple on their way out of the city, right? They're like, just so you know, we may be abandoning the city, but we're not abandoning God, right? I'm taking the ark with me, David says. It's got poles and everything. It's ready to go. It can be taken. So we can't take everything, but we can definitely take this. So they abscond with the ark. And then they say, no, we can't do that. And so the king says to Zadok, take the ark of God back to the city. If I find favor with God, I will be brought back to see it and its abode. So David's like, hold on, we can't do this. And if God should say, I do not want you, I am ready. I accept what God deems right. So what's happening here?
It's a sort of a separation of church and state. I mean, the God has, and the priests have their role, and David has his, and he doesn't want to mix the two.
Absolutely. And this is a David bonus points situation, right?
+1 for David.
Right, exactly. This is where David gets brownie points. He does, and the reason he does is because the ark now there is a political consideration. He could be concerned that the people would see him taking the ark as stealing as like trying to hold on to something that he doesn't, whatever. But it also serves, and this section also serves to teach us a little bit about the loyalty of the priests. That the priests were loyal to David, which kind of is giving us the hint from the text perspective that David is the king God wants. That there isn't any gap here, and all the priests still are with David. Even though he tells them to go back, you shouldn't assume that because they were in the city when Absalom got there, that you shouldn't assume that means they sided with Absalom. They would have sided with David, but David, pious as he is, or political, Again, we can never truly tell 100%, but this is a pretty, say 80% pious. But again, I might be biased. I like David. So you might be like, I don't like him that much, maybe 40%. But like so here we've got so David's like, okay, but you go back. I can't take the ark with me. It'll look bad. Also, if it gets destroyed, we're going to be in trouble, right? It's more than fasting for 40 days if the ark gets destroyed on your watch. So, and there is some kind of, there's a niceness to, not niceness, but there's like kind of a cleanness to his whole, like, look, if it's, God's going to make the choice in the end. Either it's me or it's him. And I can live with that. Or not live with that, as the case may turn out to be. But I can deal with that situation. I've been there before, is another, it's like, this is not the first time David has been the ersatz king. So it's not really that foreign to him. And the king said to the priest Zadok, do you understand? You return to the safety of the city with your two sons, your own son Ahimaaz and Abiatar's son Yonatan. Look, I shall linger in the steppes of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. Zadok and Abiatar brought the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they stayed there. David, meanwhile, went up the slope of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and he walked barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads and wept as they went up. The Mount of Olives is still a place of mourning, as it would turn out, as it is a cemetery today. David was told that Ahithophel was among the conspirators with Absalom, and he prayed, please, O God, frustrate Ahithophel's counsel. Right? He's like, oh, Absalom, I'm not worried about him. But Ahithophel, I'm worried about his counsel being good. When David reached the top where people would prostrate themselves to God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him with his robe torn and with earth on his head. And he's a friend of David's. David said to him, if you march on with me, you will be a burden to me. Right? And what's he really saying? He's trying to, he's being nice. He's like, go home. He's like, it's also, you're not a young man anymore. Like, what are you going to do? You're just going to die. Like, I don't have any desire for that. Yeah. But if you go back to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king. I was your father's servant formerly, and now I will be yours. Then you can nullify Ahithophel's counsel for me. So he's like, you're no good to me in battle, but you could be useful to me in espionage, which also recall is what he said to the priests when they went back. I'm going to go out into the wilderness until you inform me, until I hear from you. And when I hear from you, I'll know it's time for me to make my return. So he's got David's going all in on espionage. He's saying, I know with my meager forces, they all marched in front of me. I know everybody I got. They are not nearly enough to defeat Absalom's forces in open battle. So we're going to have to be slick about this. And so he says to his friend here, to Hushai, he says, look, you're not much of a soldier anymore, but you could be a really good spy. You will have the priests Zadok and Abiatar there, and you can report everything that you hear in the king's palace to the priests Zadok and Abiatar. So he has the full network set up before he even leaves town fully. He's like, look, the priests, they can get messages to me. You tell the priests everything Absalom says, they'll tell me, and we'll set this all right. Also, their two sons are there with them, Zadok's son Ahimaaz and Abiatar's son Yonatan, and through them you can report to me everything you hear. And so Hushai, the friend of David, reached the city as Absalom was entering Jerusalem. So literally, David just got out of there, by the way. The Mount of, if you're familiar with the geography of this place, the Mount of Olives is right outside one of those gates. So it's the hill. Jerusalem is a series of hills. there's Jerusalem, which is on top of this hill, and then the other side of the next hill is the Mount of Olives. So he came down this hill. As he's going up this other hill, he sees this guy and says, "Hey, be a spy for me." And he keeps going. And then this guy finishes going down the hill, comes up the hill, and meets Avshalom. So Avshalom was not far behind David here, in case you were wondering. David maybe got out of there 2 hours before Avshalom.
There's some good
hit the-
cinematic tension going.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why, by the way, if you watch the show House of David on Amazon, which is
Wonderful.
terrific, when they get to this, again, it will also be very cinematic. You know, they got a lot of opportunity in this David story for real, pure cinema. But yeah, okay. So Hushai's going to be a spy. David gets out of the city. Avshalom reigns in Jerusalem. Thoughts?
Again, off the topic, sort of. I also have loved House of David. I haven't checked back lately. David has killed Goliath. That's the last I'd seen. They haven't.
I'm not totally caught up either. So
Okay.
you know. I really prefer to wait to the end of a TV season and then just binge everything in a weekend.
So
Rather
fast.
than
What's it on again? Amazon?
Amazon, yeah, I think it's on
You do
Amazon.
prime time without the commercials, you know?
Right, yeah, so anyway, but yeah, it is good. Again, do I wish David looks like a little Sephardic boy, which is wonderful. Also Saul is this wonderful Israeli Arab actor, who's in a lot of stuff in Israel. And I think has won awards in Israel for his acting, and he plays Saul. It's very interesting.
A big handsome man as opposed to little David.
Well, yeah. But I do wish David was a redhead. That's the one I'm like, I just don't, but like, he's a nice little Sephardic boy, which is wonderful. A Mizrahi boy, which is great. But he's not that little. He's, he's a, what, 25 or something. He's not, he's a little boy. He's like, he's not like 14, it's like, anyway, nobody's going to hear that or care. Anyway. Okay. Chapter 16, as we continue in the story. David had passed a little beyond the summit when Siva, the servant of Mephibosheth, and we remember Mephibosheth, came toward him with a pair of saddled donkeys carrying 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisin, 100 cakes of figs, and a jar of wine. The king asked Ziva, "What are you doing with these?" Ziva answered, "The donkeys are for your majesty's family to ride on. The bread and figs are for the attendants to eat, and the wine is to be drunk by any who are exhausted in the wilderness." So this is the food. This is what we got. This. I'm the cart. I'm the guy who's got all the food that you can eat. Eat. And where is your master's son? The king asked. "He is staying in Jerusalem," Ziva replied to the king, "for he thinks that the house of Israel will now give him back the throne of his grandfather." Right? So remember Mephibosheth and David was like, "You're going to eat at my table" and all that.
Mhm.
Remember who's Mephibosheth? Right, the last remaining son of Saul.
And he was somewhat crippled.
Well, yes, he also had the foot issue, the club foot issue. Yes, so what? He said, "Oh, okay, your servant is here. Where's Mephi? Oh, well, he's back in, back in Jerusalem. He's hoping that maybe Israel will say, this house of David is really chaotic. You know who never had coups from within? The house of Saul. Let's make Mephibosheth the king again." It's like, so David's like, "You scumbag." Like, it's like, I kept you alive. I gave you a place on my table. And where are you? Hoping that somebody will just make you king. You are just such a scumbag. Okay. Okay. So, the king said to Ziva, "Then all that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours." And Ziva replied, "I bow low. Your majesty is most gracious to me." So of course, David's not really the king at this moment. Right, it's like,
Right,
maybe, but he's like, look, if I win, you showed up for me and he abandoned me. So we do see this in a lot of in a lot of monarchies where the king has the power to take wealth and land and titles and things away from people and give it to others. So he basically says, okay, anything, his house, any homes he has, money, anything, if I win, all that's yours. You, his servant, now get all of his stuff. If anyone's familiar with Game of Thrones, it's like the Gardeners to the Tyrells.
Anyone who's familiar with American politics today.
I guess. Verse 5, as King David was approaching Bahurim, I guess young men, but that's not what it means here clearly, a member of Saul's clan, a man named Shimei, son of Gera, came out from there, hurling insults as he came. So he was not very happy with David. He threw stones at David and all King David's courtiers, while all the troops and all the warriors were at his right and his left. And these are the insults that Shimei hurled. Get out, you criminal, you villain. Right? Ish Hadamim, right? He's a man of bloods. God is paying you back for all your crimes against the family of Saul, whose throne you seized. God is handing over the throne to your son Avshalom. You are in trouble because you are a criminal. So what's going on here?
False prophet who tells lies.
Well,
Well,
there's a lot of followers still of Saul, and they're not happy with David. And it's kind of the logical consequences of your actions. And he's getting paid back a bit.
in a way, I think it's an and I'm happy to hear other opinions, obviously, but I think it's an interesting reminder that the story as we hear it in the Tanakh isn't necessarily the entire and only story of every person who's living in any time a history is written. Even if most of the people are behind David, you shouldn't have ever believed that meant everyone was. That there weren't people for whom Saul's family had done good turns who would remain loyal to him. That the people were ever fully united in any 100% way, as if such a thing is possible.
History belongs to the winners.
This is yes, and this is a reminder that this guy probably would he have stood up and said this if David was still if Absalom hadn't done what he did? No, of course not. He's not stupid. But now that David's on the downswing, it gives people the opportunity to say what they've been feeling, what they've been thinking that you don't say because the king can do all kinds of stuff to you. But now David's not the king. And you can say all the things to David you wanted, which means some people, even though David did his best to make it look like he didn't, some people do believe David stole Saul's throne. That Samuel wasn't legit in deposing Saul. This guy comes down the hill yelling, "Stop the steal!" Saul's family is king of Israel. You stole it from him.
I don't know.
It's another perspective.
It's kind of interesting. I don't know if this is, I don't know. It's interesting to me that this guy, he seems to be he's outside the city, like the center of power. He's kind of, I don't know how much interpersonal interaction he realistically would have had with Saul's immediate family. So may not have been totally aware of how Saul actually was. And so has this different narrative because he didn't get to interact with Saul the way that David did. So he doesn't get to see that perspective.
For all we know, he may have merely benefited from a functionary Saul appointed. We see that in politics all the time. But because something Saul had done worked out for him, he is loyal to Saul's family. Not that, as Bay said, not that he ever knew Saul or knew that Saul was crazy or any of the things that, or knew about Saul's fights with Samuel and the trying to summon his spirit. He doesn't know, this guy doesn't know any of that. That's probably for, I would wager for certain. So anyway, it's just, okay. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why let that dead dog abuse my lord the king?" Great insults they got. Let me go over and cut off his head. Right? I mean, he's still got sword guys around. Like, he may not be the king, but he's still got sword guys. But the king said, "What has this to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? He is abusing me only because God told him to abuse David. And who is to say, why did you do that?"
Mhm. So God is the judge, that's the point, yeah.
Right. An interesting perspective that perhaps it seems like David is saying, perhaps there is something I have to learn
Mhm.
from this. It's not my place to tell him no. Also, there is that tradition that, remember, there are crazy people who walk around who are like semi-prophets. Remember, David's encountered them before on the road. So there could be, I think there could be some of that where David's like, look, I've encountered crazy, people who others think are crazy on the road who are actually touched by the divine in some way. And some of what they say is semi-prophetic. And so he's like, I don't know. Maybe this crazy guy, I don't know. This is me. This is my drosh on it. But maybe he's thinking, maybe there's something in what this guy is saying that I have to listen
Yeah,
to.
the wise fool is found throughout many of Shakespeare's plays.
Sure.
He's the one who says the truth and can get away with
But
it.
this is more specifically, I think this isn't about him being a fool. This is about him being, again, not quite prophetic, but this being something God is trying to teach
Right.
him.
Lesson.
Right. As opposed to just like Shakespeare, where it's not God doing it, it's the comedy of the universe, right? It's like, haha, that a fool had all the wisdom. It's
Yeah, Shakespeare-
theater, but it's not
Shakespeare does not invoke God.
right, right. But it's not God. In this case, he's thinking it could be a message from God. David said further to Abishai and all the courtiers, "If my son, my own issue, seeks to kill me, how much more the Benjaminite? Let him go on hurling abuse, for God has told him so." Right. So it's like, okay, he's a Benjaminite. He doesn't give a hoot about me. That's another thing, though, by the way. He's a Benjaminite. That's another reason he's a Saul supporter.
Yeah.
Benjamin's the smallest tribe, but Saul was a Benjaminite. So it's not surprising that a Benjaminite is really upset. They had a lot of influence when Saul was king, and now are back to having none because they're really small. And during the Judges period, they did that thing that nobody likes to talk about. So the rebellion, the concubine, the rebellion,
Right.
the having to do all the marrying between the tribes because Benjamin was decimated. So there's Benjamin has its own thing, but they had all the prestige when Saul was king. So that could also be a reason this guy was a supporter of, it might not just be general policies or something. It might be an ethnic ties, kind of. So perhaps God will look upon my punishment and recompense me for the abuse he has uttered, Shimei has uttered today. Yeah. So he's like, okay, maybe this is part of my punishment. It's like we let it happen. Maybe this takes down my negative credit that I've clearly incurred here against me from God. Yeah.
Say something about the fact, Rabbi, that David mentions Absalom for the first time here. You don't see him pulling out his hair and saying, "This is my blood and kin, my son who's trying to kill me." We don't hear any of that. We hear only, if Absalom was trying to kill me, this guy has a right to curse me. It's missing to me.
What's missing?
The
Sorry.
grief of the father and the
Well, you got to remember a couple things. First of all, grief of the father. He's been kind of estranged from Absalom for a while. They reconciled in court, but they haven't been close for years, maybe a decade already at this point. I mean, they were never really that close. First of all, David was never really that close with any of his kids, so much. He just wasn't that attendant a father. Not uncommon for kings, but still. he I think he's probably saddened by it, but sees the political maneuver for what it is from a dangerous, violent, and self-righteous person, which he already knows Absalom to be.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure he considers this outside the realm of possible things Absalom would do. I don't get the sense that he's shocked. And I think that's part of why the grief you're not seeing.
Sure.
Also, like he's a leader. Like if you're in a leader situation, also like he cried all the way out of the city. Like they already said that. He did weeping. Yeah, so he wept already. Yeah, so I wouldn't say he's not broken up about it. David and his men, verse 13, continued on their way while Shimei walked alongside the slope of the hill, insulting him as he walked, and throwing stones at him and flinging dirt. So he just kept following them, and it's like a Monty Python skit at this point. It's just like all these people with swords are like, we shouldn't do anything, and David's like, no. As another mud thing hits him in the side of the head, and he goes, ugh. It's just like, okay. I mean, so he follows them for a while and keeps yelling at him and throwing things at him. The king and all who accompanied him arrived exhausted, and he rested in this plains of the wilderness place. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the troops, Israel's force, Israel, the men of Israel, arrived in Jerusalem together with Achitophel. When Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came before Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king, Yehi HaMelech." But Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why didn't you go with your friend? Right? You're the good king. You're the good king, the good friend of the former king. What are you doing here?" "Not at all," Hushai replied. "I am for the one whom God and these troops and all the rest of Israel's force has chosen, and I will stay with him." Interesting there. He mentions God, but it seems like the balance is the troops and all the rest of Israel's forces has chosen. Clearly not a purely God-driven decision for this king to be reigning. But okay, so I'm with whoever's the rightful king, is what he's trying to say. And since that seems to be you, we'll say you. If I were Absalom, I'd be like, why would you think I'm the rightful? Like, it's like, holy whoa, like there's no way you should trust this guy. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm rooting for Hushai. Furthermore, whom should I serve if not David's son? As I was in your father's service, so I will be in yours. Right? So he makes a practical argument here. He's like, okay, well, first of all, you have all the symbols of authority. You're here in Jerusalem, which is the holy city. You have the army. That's a big sign for the king. And also, you're David's son. David, he's on the run. He'll probably be killed soon, like Saul, like what happened to Saul. So why would I serve somebody who's definitely going to be dead soon? I'd rather just keep being important and serve you.
I feel like if I was Avshalom in this situation,
Yeah.
I would be like, that is the most cowardly thing I've ever heard, and off with your head. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I just feel like when someone like,
Yeah.
if you're pretending to turn on someone else, it comes across as though you have no loyalty and that you'll just turn on me the moment more important people come along. And so I don't know.
Right. It's absolutely, in a way, I think what he's trying to avoid doing is the thing that definitely gets you executed throughout all of history, which is I'm switching sides because you're really the good one. That's the thing nobody ever trusts because you will just switch sides. He's trying to portray it more as he's a neutral arbiter, which means, you're right that he might not be totally loyal to Absalom, but that he's not still loyal to David.
Right.
He's trying to walk that tightrope, I think, because you're right. That thing is totally, it's instantly like, nope, dead. You are either useless or dangerous. Because you're traitorous. So I don't want you around me anywhere. You either get out of here or I'm killing you. This is I'm a long time, I have a lot of institutional knowledge. I have a lot of experience getting things done for the king. I'm loyal to your family. This is a fait accompli, and I'm a neutral arbiter. And I just want to serve the people and the king. And he's hoping that he snakes his way through there, saying, well, you won, man. It's over. I'm just trying to help out. And apparently he doesn't become the top guy, obviously. He's got Achitophel, but he's like, okay, fine. You can look, he needs courtiers, right? He needs a bunch of people to run the kingdom. So he's like, okay, you've got experience. We see this today. There's a young man. His name, he goes by Al-Shara. He's the new president of Syria. For a decade, he fought against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Anybody who knows who runs the Bank of Syria that just got their loans were paid off to the IMF so they can take out new international loans? Any idea who runs the Bank of Syria? The same guy who ran the Bank of Syria under Bashar al-Assad. Does it matter to not Jelani anymore, to Al-Shara that the guy ran? No, because he's a neutral guy who just wants to do a job and not die. And Al-Shara needs a guy who knows how to run the damn bank. Because while he has a lot of great guys who are really good at firing AK-47s, that does not help you when you're trying to run an international SWIFT system through a banking system. It just doesn't help. So he needs people. Absalom needs some people with institutional knowledge to help run this kingdom. So it's not just Absalom's a dummy as to why he lets this guy in, right? I'm sure he's thinking, I got to keep an eye on this guy because he's my dad's best friend. And you're right, there is a level of dumbness to this where it's like, certainly if you're going to have him around, be like, okay, run the bank, but I'm not telling you anything important. Like, you were, anyway. So there's some politicking here, but anyway. So Avshalom then says to Achitophel, his chief advisor, what do you advise us to do? Okay, now we've got Jerusalem, we've got the tribes, what do we do? And Achitophel said to Avshalom, Bo, come to El Pilgshay Avicha. Go to your father's concubines. The translation here, right? Go have intercourse with your father's concubines, whom he left to mind the palace. And when all Israel hears that you have dared the wrath of your father, all who support you will be encouraged. Wow.
Yeah.
This is the smartest guy in Israel. Although David did pray that his counsel would be terrible. And this is terrible.
Terrible. Yeah.
Effing advice. Sorry but like, you should know this is really bad advice. Right. The commentary is putting forward that what it's saying is right. He said the commentators say that they go on to say, by engaging in intercourse with the concubines of the previous king, you will vividly demonstrate that you are his replacement. Goes on to say, this is certainly a morally dubious act, but it will be known to all. Not everything that's known to all is a good thing, but that's what they do. And they will hear that you have become, that you have dared the wrath of your father or become loathsome. They'll know that you're really enemies, that it's really, you can't support just the house of David. You can't be neutral. One of these two has to win and one has to die, right? You're familiar with the phrase Dems fighting words? Well, this is that times 1,000.
Them's fighting actions.
Right, exactly. These are certainly fighting actions. There's nothing you can do.
That's why William Faulkner titled his book Absalom, Absalom.
It says here, and the hands of everyone who is with you, your active followers and those who wish to support you but are wavering, will be strengthened. It goes on to say, Ahithophel was the cleverest man in Israel, but he was by no means a moral individual. Rather, he was motivated solely by political considerations. In his mind, the step he was proposing was an easy one to execute. It did not exact a heavy price, and its symbolic meaning should be clear. Avshalom had taken over the throne in an absolute manner from his father.
I think that's an interesting description, the cleverest man in Israel.
Right, he was the cleverest,
Yeah,
but he wasn't more necessarily moral.
oftentimes the cleverest are not.
Well, I mean, being clever is good for a king to have on your team, but he clearly should have been listening to literally someone else, just anyone else, who probably would have said, second thought, don't do that. Maybe instead of that, do anything else. Go kill him, do something, but don't do that. It's gonna look bad to the people.
I'm thinking of a New Testament saying, it says, knowledge puffeth up, and the cleverest are oftentimes not who they should be, so to speak.
I'm reminded too, was it Reuben who slept with
Judah.
Judah?
Wait, no, sorry, finish your sentence.
Who slept with Jacob's wife, and when Jacob gave his blessings, he remembered that, and I think Reuben suffered.
It wasn't a wife, it was a concubine.
Or a concubine.
Oh, yeah.
This is a throwback, I think, in a way, too.
Well, there's that, and obviously directly to the prophecy that had to do with David's sin with Bathsheba,
Yes.
which we're about to see come to full fruition in front of literally everyone. Okay, let's do it. So verse 22. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. Because again, it had to be on a roof for the prophecy. Because what did David do? The roof. She was on the roof. So we got the roof. Absalom on the roof. And Absalom lay with his father's concubines with the full knowledge of all Israel. Not just with the full knowledge. What does it say in Hebrew? Le'enei kol Yisrael.
In the sight of all Israel.
In the eyes of all Israel. Imagine a stadium with 1 million. No, but I'm just saying. That's what has to be for the prophecy. Why? So everyone saw the concubines being brought to Absalom in the tent. This was the fulfillment of Nathan's prophecy to David, following his sin with Bathsheba, that the deed David performed in private would be carried out in public before all Israel. It is even possible that this public event was performed on the same roof, which is why I mentioned the roof, where David had been when the episode involving Bathsheba began. So it may have indeed been that roof across from the palace that he chose to bring these ladies. In those days, the advice that Ahithophel gave was accepted like an oracle sought from God. That is how all the advice of Ahithophel was esteemed both by David and by Absalom. It's funny because the commentary goes on to say it's basically what we were talking about before, that such a public act was certainly improper. It says, therefore, the verse offers a parenthetical aside by way of explanation, which is this last verse, which is that it's like, I know this seems like this was a really bad idea, but in those days, if Ahithophel said to do something, the king did it, like it was an oracle from God. Even though this clearly looks like a dumb idea to you. So they're trying to say, if you were to think that we made up this story because it's too dumb to be real, you shouldn't think that, because it's actually the fault of the kings for being dumb enough to listen to Ahithophel in every situation, not our fault. It's like it's just one of those stories too dumb to be believed, but it's real. That's what they're trying to. That's what that last verse here is doing. Is them just saying, just so you know, they felt they had to listen to his advice, even though anyone could have predicted this would not be a great idea.
Back to belaboring that idea of cleverest, what's the actual Hebrew word there, do you think?
Yeah, no, I can. Let me go to where it says he's the cleverest man in Israel again. Is it? Must be in the last chapter.
I'm just speculating, what do we think of when we hear the person's clever? It has kind of negative connotations to me, pejorative.
Now, if the Tanakh had said he was wise. that
Wise,
would be a
yes.
different-
Clever means to be full of wool over people's eyes and somewhat in my.
Scheming.
Well, and a lot of David's actions were clever, not wise.
I'm trying to find,
That's all right, what I'm saying.
oh, I mean, I just need to find the Hebrew, but I need to find the. Okay, no, we already did that. Where is? See it. Can't find the verse.
I think the word clever came in the commentary.
Oh, was it in the
Yeah, it was in the
commentary?
commentary.
Oh, okay.
Then I could find it, but then I'd need to find the commentary, and I'm not gonna go through each of the commentaries to find it again.
That's
I could find it in the Hebrew
But it
there,
got
but
across the point.
Mhm.
sure, yeah.
I guess I'm really struck by the idea that David prayed that Absalom's counsel would be bad or wrong or in, not.
Yeah, that Ahithophel would fail in his
That
counsel.
story to me that,
Counsel.
yeah.
All right, I agree. I'm just gonna wrap this up on here and we can finish our conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on